Hello, everybody. I am finally back with some more manga reviews. Of course, I cannot stay away from mangas. And yes, I am here to talk about something that's not as heavy as what I was talking about the last time I was in the show. Yeah, and figure these are kind of filmed not too far from each other. I give myself a little time to decompress, obviously. Though I am talking about, of course, the gloriously long Mobile Suit, Mobile Suit Gundam Wing, Volume 7. I'm not saying the entire title, and I am running out of jokes for us. Now, those who do remember my last bit of talking about it, even though it's been over a year, I believe now, I was really getting mixed on the series. Volume 6 touched on a lot of different topics. It felt like it went through like a dozen different episodes really fast. Here, I think I've kind of started to realize why. It's not so much that it feels like it's going too fast. It's because it's starting to get into the minutia of the middle of the Mobile Suit Gundam Wing series, which, to put it in the best light, was really fucking complicated. It got really like, well, Rockefeller Foundation's fighting against Cherry's faction group of people, but they're still part of Oz, but they're not, and they are, and then there's also the Saint Kingdom, and then there's the colonies, and then there's the colonies that are actually fighting with Oz, and then there's the colonies that are not fighting against Oz. It got so confounding after a while, and I was like, alright, I get it that war can be really confusing, and there's not always just a black or white, that there's good guys and bad guys or whatnot. The problem was just it constantly, you just felt like we were going through just, oh, well, we got to go through these different factions that felt very interchangeable, for lack of a better way. Like, I doubt anybody could tell me 100% what the Rockefeller Foundation's ideals were or anything like that. So, because of a lot of 6 and a bit of 5 were dealing with that, they began to feel very disconnected, is the best way to put it. And not only that, but there was a lot of stuff they had to cram in, because let's just admit, these are little thin mangas. These are very small. So there's a lot they have to include, especially considering this is an action series, and it's hard. There's a lot of fighting going on throughout most volumes. There's very little downtime for everything. With that being said, and I will say, I originally went through this, read it, fucking didn't give a shit about it. And I just like, fuck it, whatever. Let's just move the hell along. I decided to reread it. And not that I don't reread my mangas. I actually do reread through them and try to see if they hold up any better, or see if there's some stuff I might have missed, especially on the worst mangas. Like, I've reread Attack on Titan Volume 1. I still don't give a shit about it. I have not reread Battle Royale, just because that was ones I really went through and just tried to dissect every little thing there was. But I decided, it's like, alright, is this as bad as I remember? Especially after I decided to read Volume 8. This is actually one of the rare times I've actually read Volume 8 and then went right back and read Volume 7. Because I'll just go ahead and spoil a little bit of Volume 8. I actually kind of enjoyed it. But then I went back and reread Volume 7. And I think I finally figured it out. And it's one of the issues with it, but it kind of works after you finally get to what feels like more the finality of this particular area of it. The issue is that there is about 20 storylines kind of popping up. There's stuff dealing with Relina, there's stuff dealing with Trays, there's stuff dealing with the Gundam pilots, there's stuff dealing with the Gundam scientists, there's stuff dealing with Lady Un, and it all feels almost at first disconnected until one of the last volumes where it kind of starts coming back together. That is both a good and a bad thing. Good thing in the fact that, okay, well, this feels like it has a finality to it. It's like, it feels like there's a point to where almost you could stop if you want to and give yourself like, and if you're one of those people who just barrels through mangas one after the other. You're like, all right, I could take a little break for a little bit and maybe read some other mangas. I'm just a weirdo. I just will try to randomly read a bit here and there. And I'll like maybe read some of the old ones after I reread one thing or another. But here, there is a lot of storylines are all converging really towards Volume 8. Volume 8 doesn't tie it all like, all right, this is the end of the Gundam series. Obviously, it doesn't do that. That would be absurd to end 48 episodes in 8 volumes. Yikes. It's 6 episodes a volume, pretty much. And considering the first volume really was pretty much episode 1, maybe a bit of episode 2, but even then, I would dare say most just dealt with 1. And like I said, it does do a good job that it feels like it's all coming together. But this still has its problems in the fact that until you get to 8, this is confounding at times. That's where I think the problem always persists, especially in these past couple volumes, 6 and 7. Speaking, of course, of 7 here. There is a lot of stuff that you need from these volumes to get a lot of stuff that happens in 8. But then there's also a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense until you get to 8. There's a lot of stuff that really doesn't feel as impactful as it really should until you get to Volume 8. Sure, we get the resolution of Quattro flying the Wing Zero and him fighting Hero and all that. We get that in here. But we don't really get to know much about Wing Zero. We don't really understand most of its bullshit qualities. Let's just put it that way. I like the Mobile Suit Gundam franchise when they start diving headfirst into like the Psychum or Psychomo or however they pronounce it, armor and how new types work, how the Wing Zero, and later on, just to spoil this for anybody who hasn't read or watched the 20-year-old anime, dealing with, I'm sorry, it's nearly 30 years old at this point. Yikes, it's old. But dealing with when it comes to the Mobile Suit Gundam Wings franchise, like how the Wing Zero and the Epion system works, it gets so weird and doesn't exactly make the most sense. Like, that is truly just the biggest problem I can say within these past 3 volumes, is that it is explained that it does heighten a pilot's capabilities, but sometimes it doesn't really explain how it's heightening their abilities. And also how it's allowing them to see visions or anything like that. The most it does is just kind of makes people go kind of crazy. At that long and short of it, people go crazy using it. Yeah, it's kind of it. It's like, alright, cool. But there's a few people that are able to harness it in ways that they weren't quite expecting. Not even going to begin to get into that. To try and dissect it is like trying to undo like an accordion knot with your eyes closed and your hands tied behind your back and you're using your feet. It's way, way too much. But where there is good within this volume, I will say it tries to give us some more character development for the scientists and also for Wu Fei and Duo, though it still doesn't 100% make sense at times. And also there's still the stuff dealing with Rockefeller Foundation going on in the background, which I never gave a shit as a kid. I never gave a shit when I rewatched the series. I still don't give a shit now. I never cared for it's like, oh, we got a bunch of twirly evil villains behind the scenes of everything. That is going to add so much to everything. Yeah. Like I said, none of this is bad. In fact, rereading this, it gets better. I still don't say this is a great volume. It's a little too much that you have to have all the supplementary reading. You also have to have all the supplementary understanding of certain things. That makes it a bit of a slog. Once I finally got to 8, I was so happy. I was like, all right, this finally is, everything's clicking a little bit better here. It's like, all right, this is making a little bit more sense. There are still some parts I'm a little baffled on, but I'm not as like, oh, well, this, feels like I am being dumped headfirst into a story without even knowing a character's name. No, there's not as much of that. In fact, there's not as much in here. In fact, I dare say like about 65% of this particular book is fighting. Mostly between the Mercurius, piloted by Hero, against Quattro and the Wing Zero. That doesn't seem like a fair fight. And then, of course, at the end, when Duo and Wu Fei somehow their Gundams were being rebuilt by the scientists at this lunar base, but it doesn't explain why the scientists were rebuilding them and how they rebuilt them so quickly or anything. Not getting into it. Sure, they were like, oh, it's only 70% complete. That's still a lot more percent complete than I would think a few weeks or months would give you. But who am I to ask and judge? So this one, I will waffle on. I will give it a good waffle score in a way. There is, if you are a fan of the series, I would say if it kind of turns you off because it does get into a lot of minutia. It gets into a lot of backstory with different foundations and how, like, everybody deals with each other or anything like that. And there isn't quite as much good character development. There is still some, but it's not as much as, say, the one that's mostly about Wu Fei and dealing with his wife. You know, there is not as much that you're going to care as much for, but stick with it. You're going to get to Volume 8 and you're going to get that eureka moment. You're going to get that moment where you're like, this is making more sense. I actually am enjoying this a lot more. Like, I was able to barrel through 8 pretty quickly. Like, I was like, this is really jazzing with me. Even though 8 is a lot more exposition and a lot more heavy-handed with some things where it's kind of talking about different things. I didn't mind that as much. Because I had, like, 3 volumes of nothing but action. And that felt like they were disconnected and disjointed from each other the entire time. So don't mind me for finally having some fucking backstory for all this. If 6 kind of really did turn you off, I warn you, 7's not going to really be your big cup of tea. It's still going to feel like there's a lot happening that isn't making a lot of sense. I do apologize for that deeply. But trust me, stick with it till you get to 8. Let 8 be the deciding factor. I will also talk about 8. It's good things, its shortcomings. The biggest issue I can say with this is it's too much still of a bridge. There is obviously, this is not going to be anywhere near like an end of a story, or even at times it doesn't even feel like a good stopping point, even though like it ends after Zex kind of, showing his allegiance, which is not towards the Rockefeller Foundation, even though he originally was they were trying to like, oh, join up with us, Zex, blah, 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 blah. It's, like I said, there is some good here. There is a lot that if you are not as entrenched or entranced with everything, and you're not going to enjoy it. And in fact, I would say if you are a person that was kind of being turned off from 6, I will let you know 7's going to kill it for you. You're not going to give any shits whatsoever. You're just going to tune out and be like, nope, don't care anymore. Which is fine. It's completely understandable. I get it. It's not exactly the easiest thing to try and get into. But if you do want to if you were willing to stick through 6, you're going to have to stick a little bit through 7. But trust me, there's going to be a good nugget at the end of it all. It's not going to feel like it was completely in vain. At least there's that much to go for. But hey, that's my opinions on Overly Long Title Volume 7. What did you think of it? Tell me what... Did you like it? Did you also think that you're like, oh my god, what the fuck's happening? There's 5 billion things happening, and none of them make any sense. But hey, I'm going to see y'all later with something that I've probably been needing to talk about for a little bit, so let's get into it. So until then, I'll see y'all later, so bye-bye, everybody.